Woo! Anybody got any chicken right now? Absolutely. Well, this is my opportunity to welcome our guest speaker for this day. And I asked him to write a short bio for me. Well, there's not a bio that could be short or long enough for this person. But I have one thing to show you. You see this little square right over here? It has his name on it. Right. It has his name right here. And you know why? Because the artist signs his work. Stephen Jacquier, my darlings.
Mahalo. And mahalo to everybody who leaned in on all the many different aspects of the creation and execution of the windows here. Andrew Arrowsmith, my Hanai son, who was so instrumental in the design, and all of those who did so much work with it over the years. It's a community effort, everything we do. And, you know, somehow or other it comes together, the beautiful music with Kazumi, the wonderful creative thought with Joan. We did not speak with each other beforehand, and yet it's just this perfect synergy, this perfect flow. It's like, you know, we planned it a lot and coordinated it for weeks. No, not at all. It's just amazing how it all comes together. Well, you know, if you only have one thought, if you only have one prayer, let it be gratitude. And that's really enough. And seeing how this flows, seeing how it comes together, I really do feel that. Reverend Beverly, thanks for inviting me. It's great to see everybody coming in the community here and out there in internet land. This is marvelous, the technology. And also the beautiful Aina here in Hawaii. It's great to be back. Also, mahalo to Reverend Kathy and our beloved late great Reverend Tag, carrying the torch. And providing the space for us, and teaching so many wonderful classes that so many of us have benefited from so much. Lots of mahalos to go around. And I especially want to say mahalo, because I really do feel genuine, deep gratitude for my classmates in the Thursday Conversations in Consciousness that meets here at 10 o'clock every Thursday. And my classmates in the various Science of Mind classes that I've been a student in and had the joy of being able to be instructor for, and online, the online community. And whether it's Science of Mind or Triton Leadership with the Odyssey program, I have benefited so hugely from that. Some venues, like the classes, it's more in a receiving mode. Like I'm receptive, like a cup being filled. And in other venues, like the Conversations on Thursday, there's a co-exploration, a co-discovery that's taking place. It's a different format, and it's really exciting to be in both. I especially value the Conversations, and I invite you to join us on Thursdays, if you'd like. Well, I was invited to hold forth a bit on self-care, and you know who are absolutely notorious for not going and seeing the doctor? Doctors, right? It's a very appropriate topic for many of us to hear, because physician, heal thyself, right? I'm actually, you know, I've made a living as a researcher in the sciences, and so we provide information to clinicians such as doctors, and yet I've seen it over and over and over again with my physician friends. It really is true. Well, in this exploration that I invite you to this morning, I don't want to be giving definitions. Instead, I want to invite you to the question. I want you to try out the distinctions. With definitions, it's like the talking head saying, this is the way it is, right? Putting it in a box. You open up the dictionary and that's the way it is, defined. That's not what we're up to in this community. What we're up to here is exploring and discovering together. And when you're in the question, you're exploring distinctions. And it's in that spirit that I bring to you this sermon. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid and I went to hear a sermon, I was told the way it is, you know? I mean, the sermon was the truth with a capital T from the book that had the absolute truth in it, and that's not this. This is an invitation to try it on for yourself, see how it fits, and question, explore. And that's what I love about the centers for spiritual living. That's, you know, the approach here. Well, I was born in Placerville, which is a little town in Northern California, the heart, the golden heart of the gold rush country. And when I was born there, I was the biggest baby on record. My poor mother, 36 hours of labor. And actually, it had taken 9 months and 3 weeks for me to decide to come out and play. They were starting to get nervous. It's like, come on, kid, let's get the show on the road. And when I finally made my appearance, and the young doctor, exhausted young doctor, gave me a welcoming swat on the butt. You know how most babies go, wah, 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 wah. I opened my mouth and went, wah! And everybody knew Puna Men's Chorus had just received a bass singer. And, you know, it's been fun ever since. Placer, from the Latin, it actually means pleasant. You know, so a pleasant place, Placerville. And if you look at the old writings in Latin, you'll see that they've also used it the way we would use the words beautiful and lovely. So literally born into pleasure, born into beauty, born into love. And I think, honestly, regardless of the geography of where we happen to be born, and how many pounds we were, we're all born in Placerville. Now, whether we stay there or not has a lot to do with our choices regarding self-care. Do we want to dwell in that, or do we, kind of get distracted and sidetracked on it? A lot of it has to do with our origins. Our families of origin, the place and context, the language, the circumstances into which we're born, and all of those coping strategies that our culture and our family and we ourselves come up with as we grow. A gold nugget I will offer to you from my own childhood is a limerick that I heard over and over and over as I grew up in the mountains, the Sierra Nevada mountains. A wonderful bird is the pelican. Its beak can hold more than its belly can. He can hold in his beak enough food for a week, but I'll be darned if I know how the hell he can. That's from Dixon Merritt, quipped back in 1913. And I heard it over and over and over as I was a kid. I loved it, and I was enchanted by the notion of this mythical beast, this pelican, because I lived way up in the mountains, up by Lake Tahoe, up in the Sierra Nevadas, and I was probably 10 or 11 before I ever saw the ocean, so I'd never seen a pelican. And I heard all these descriptions of a pelican, and I thought, well, this is a marvelous mythical beast. Well, actually, if we go to our first slide, we'll see a golden nugget here, an old platter from like the 1200s or medieval period, with an image of this mythical beast, the pelican, the way that it was described to the monks and priests and church people throughout medieval Europe, and somehow or other, the word that they got was the pelican was a beast that wounded itself. It pecked its own breast, it scored its own breast, and the blood that came out of its own breast, it fed its chicks with that. And you can see how in the illuminated manuscripts from back there are pictures of this and various illustrations. None of these even look remotely like a pelican, but they'd never seen one either. And this was the word that they got, and they passed it on to their parishioners. And it was in sculptures, in churches everywhere, and the first time I saw this image, it was in a huge tapestry at the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. I saw it in National Geographic magazine when I was a little boy, and she's walking across this huge tapestry, and there's this enormous pelican doing this, and blood coming out. And I said to my mom, "What's going on here?" And they told me the story. And of course, it's a myth, but a lot of people, even to this day, because it's been perpetuated so much. And remember that stained glass windows were storybooks back in the day. Most people could not read or write. And so they'd go into the cathedrals and they'd learn the stories, the Bible stories, from these and this supporting, mythos, the dogmas, from these stained glass windows. And so there's some really beautiful imagery of this wounding, this suffering and mortification to feed the chicks. It's incorporated into the architecture. And signet rings, and other jewelry. The nobles would wear these diamond and ruby encrusted emblems of this, with a ruby signifying blood, symbolizing blood. So we get to today, and we all know that this is a myth, right? Oh, and by the way, another variation on this myth is that the pelican deliberately eats poisonous snakes and poisonous amphibians so that when it wounds itself and feeds its chicks, it confers immunity from poisonous reptiles on the chicks. None of it is true, not a word of it. This image is from a 2016 web posting teaching that story as literal truth. So this kind of stuff perpetuates. These myths, these mistaken notions, do actually perpetuate, even unto this very day, kind of amazingly. And back in the day, people saw a real similarity between the selfless sacrifice of the pelican for its chicks, the wounded heart, the bleeding heart, and the Jesus of Nazareth version of the Christ, with the crucifixion and the sacrifice and being redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Some of these images are just fantastic. Notice the wily serpent with the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil wending its way down there around the base of the pelican's nest. So it's very, very overtly, very consciously, mapped over in these traditions. Well, Ernest Holmes, on this whole thing of suffering and mortification and painful self-sacrifice as being virtuous, Ernest Holmes noted that practically the whole human race is hypnotized because it thinks what somebody else told it to think. And Holmes invites us to think for ourselves. And yeah, these were great stories once upon a time. They have served their purpose. And as Holmes went on to say in page 107 of The Science of Mind, the world is beginning to realize that it has learned all it should through suffering and pain. Surely there can be no intelligence in the universe that wishes man to be sick, suffer pain, be unhappy, and end in oblivion. Surely, if God or universal intelligence is imbued with goodness, then it could not ordain that man should ultimately be other than a perfect expression of life. Absolutely. Brothers and sisters, can I get an amen? So, on this topic of caring, I think a lot of people, just because, of origins and everything, we've got a confusion in our minds between caring and codependent enmeshment. And what Joan was saying earlier about feeling guilty, when, we're supposed to be, suffering here and grieving and all, and yet there's we notice something beautiful. And we feel a little moment of joy, and then we feel guilt about that. Well, what's that about? I mean, that's not aligned with the divine notion of beauty and love and joy. If we're in codependency, we're having unconscious reactions. These other forms of just reflexive, reactive suffering. I would argue that caring is a conscious response, and that would include caring about yourself, self-care. It's a declaration we make. It's a choice we make. It's something that we choose to embrace. We have to care enough. If we say that we care about others, right, and we're going to be like the pelican, feeding them with our own blood, gory image that is, then we need to care enough to choose appropriate self-care for ourselves. Remember, physician, heal thyself, right? There are still traditions today. You can go online, the crew, bless them, the Duggar family, the folks on TV that have like 19 kids, their teaching is accept suffering as a blessing. Well, the literal word blessing means to increase, right? And Holmes reminds us that the universe is a mirror that reflects back to us that which we hold. And I agree with him about the accepting suffering. Don't resist it. Whatever you resist, it just feeds it more energy, perpetuates it. And I don't know that I really want to increase it. I think there's a distinction there. So being Christ-like, the whole thing with the crucifix and so on, it's the suffering there. I think there's a different symbol that I prefer. And this one happens to come from the tarot cards, and yet you can find it in many different ways. And I love the symbolism. It's got, the divine represented there in the hand. The background is this neutral. Basically, this is the Science of Mind teaching symbol in a different format. Same thing, different format. You've got the neutral ground of being. You've got the divine hand supporting. You've got the union of the masculine and the feminine. The streams there, the fluid, the flow. There's 5 of them. They represent the 5 senses. And on and on and on. I mean, there's all the clouds represent transience, changing form, and so on. It's rich with symbolism, and I love it because to me this is a perfect sort of representation of self-care. Care enough to take care of yourself, and then your cup will overflow. You will have enough for yourself and extra. You'll have enough for others as well. Ernest Holmes said the universe must exist for the self-expression of God and the delight of God. And I prefer this sort of articulation and symbolism of that to that of woe and suffering and grief. And there are many different forms and many different ways, just like each of us has a different individualization, a different presentation, and yet we share in common some similarities with each other in our experience. So too with this. This one was one of my favorites back in the day when I was doing my summer of love stuff. This is a feisty one. This is a feisty one. I think this is from the Wiccan tarot. And the gal up there that's cavorting in the cup, emblazoned on the cup, is capitalist tears. Have fun with it. Enjoy it. It can be majestic and regal. It can be cartoon-like. But however, it shows up for you. Remember, you can't give what you don't have, right? So, if you perceive that there is a hole in your bucket, and instead of your cup overfloweth, then get thee to a class. Get thee to a Thursday conversation in consciousness. Get thee to, if this is not the venue for you, then do something like Triton Leadership, the Odyssey program, which is fantastic. I vouch for it. I personally guarantee it. But release and let go of anything unlike good. Remember that as you aspire to this, there's going to be the crabs in the bucket. Yeah, you know about the crabs in the bucket, right? One crab decides it wants to climb out of the bucket. And all the other crabs grab a hold of it and drag it back down. I say, no, you don't. You're not going anywhere. Well, there's always going to be these crabs in the bucket dragging you back down. They could be external. And so for self-care, you might need to recognize sometime when there is a crab, a bunch of crabs in your bucket, and let those go and find a different community that promotes you climbing out of that bucket and on to bigger and better things rather than staying stuck there. Sometimes it's internal and you find yourself starting to climb up and well, guess what? That's why we have practitioners. That's why we have Reverend Beverly, Reverend Kathy. When we cannot know the truth for ourselves, that's when we reach out to our practitioners and say, please, this is what I'm up against. Help know the truth for me. It's like in the chorus. And by the way, we're going to be, as a community, we're going to be walking in the parade on the 24th in Hilo. And then I'll be singing with Twin Men's Chorus at the gazebo. And one of the songs that I'll be singing is Hail Friends. I'll sing just a couple of bars for you. Hail friends of music, in music's praise we gather, etc. Now, that's the baseline. I'm counting on not just the baritones and the second tenors and the first tenors to be doing their lines and interweaving it together. It's just beautiful. I'm also counting on the other basses, that when I run out of air and I can't carry the note long enough, they carry the note for me. And it still sounds beautiful. And that's what the practitioners do and our ministers do for us. So please make use of that resource. Practices of health, well-being, and contribution. I could give you a list, but that would be prescriptive. It's better if you explore and discover for yourself, what does this for you? And there are many different practices, whether it's mindful breathing. Reverend Tagg was fond of saying, remember to breathe. And indeed, it starts with that. I invite you to live in that ongoing inquiry of what fills your cup to overflowing. And in this community is a perfect place to do it. Mahalo.